kids are doing meetings, and a lot of them are like overlapping, like theirs and mine. Like tomorrow we have all three of us have a meeting at the same time.
Yeah.
But for some reason I couldn't get audio going on their, like on my phone or on their tablets, but I'm just gonna have to keep playing with it.
Huh. I wonder if your dial or your download speed will be affected at all if you have 3 devices going simultaneously.
I hope not.
Right.
Well, actually, you know what? Their tablets are connected to like my mom's internet plan because she bought it for them for Christmas, or like her like Verizon plan.
Oh.
So hopefully not. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see, I guess.
You'll have to see how it goes. Anybody else have any experience with multiple devices using Zoom or internet at the same time?
I don't know about the multiple devices, but I tried to use Zoom on my phone Monday when we did it. I started on my phone and then I switched to my computer, but at first I didn't have any audio. I could see you talking, but I couldn't hear anything. And I don't know if you guys could hear me or not, because we had, like, I was on my way home. I was in the vehicle. So, like, I had my dad talking and everything. But I can't remember what exactly I did. I had to go in and click on something to get the audio to come up. I had to, like, ask. It said something about asking for audio, and I clicked on that and it automatically gave me audio.
Okay.
Then you got it. Uh-huh.
Fair enough. I'll just have to play around with them a little more.
Yeah, maybe. So let me just share the Blackboard screen for just a second again. And we just talked about the Zoom link. So anybody who just came in the last,
bothering you.
anybody who came in the last few minutes, from now on, when we go to have a Zoom meeting, I will not send an invite. I will simply have you go to this link and you click on it and it'll take you to the meeting. The other thing I wanted to mention, long as I was here, and I know you guys probably already know this, but in case, the content folder has all of the recorded Zoom meetings, which I don't know, there's maybe how many here, I don't know, but I'll add this one to that after we're done today. This is an updated schedule that we sent around. And then these are the voiceovers, and I'm going to break these down by chapter for you. So I did 2 of these, one yesterday, one today.
Looked at any of the voiceovers yet?
Yeah, you should be looking at those. And then, of course, the muscular system voiceovers, there's quite a few of them here.
Unless I speak.
Yeah.
Right, type in.
Those you should be into. The other thing that I wanted to mention, let's see. Well, we've already talked about the practice websites, right? I don't know if you guys are looking at these or not, but there's some good click and drag exercises to help learn the muscles, the bones. Super helpful. There is that website here from, I forget the guy's name. Chen is his last name. Definitely check this YouTube channel out. It's very, very good. Yeah.
I know on Monday somebody was saying they had trouble accessing the video thing for like the muscles. I went through and I clicked on it and I just had to verify that it was a trusted site and it loaded for me.
What video specifically, Sarah, are you referring to?
The chapter 9, I think it was the, where is it?
Oh, mine?
Oh, is that like school people?
Yeah, there were people in my class.
It was the muscular system one.
Hey. See what you did? Keep getting your fucking sister going.
You're not talking about the voiceovers. You're talking about the Zoom?
Yeah, no. When you go into Blackboard, the actual PowerPoints,
Voice board.
Somebody was saying they couldn't load one of the videos.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
moron, I can tell.
Well, but you were able to get it to run.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of these, I embed the video into the PowerPoint as opposed to running it from
Shit, man.
a file that I've got on my thumb drive, so that you guys have a more seamless way of downloading and playing the videos. The other thing that I would just say is, if you ever have trouble playing a video, there's a fairly decent chance that if you YouTube that topic, you might find it there too. Not always, but oftentimes I've noticed that. Okay, so any questions on Blackboard, what's here, et cetera, et cetera? Everybody good with that?
Yep, let's move on. Let's go.
Okay.
How do you pee when that's on? You raise your hand and you.
I had a question about your last slides. I mean, your last PowerPoint presentation about respiratory system.
The voiceover?
Yeah.
Stuck on voiceover.
That's a kid. He's
I
asking about
was
it.
just wondering why there's smooth muscle lining the bronchi and the lungs.
Well, you've heard of people, for example, that have asthma attacks.
Yeah.
That often results from the smooth muscle, which is involuntary muscle, as you know, constricting, which well, not eliminates, but reduces the flow of air in and out of the lungs. So it's a way of, in essence, regulating airflow. That's why it's smooth muscle. And you have no conscious control, of course, over that because it's involuntary.
Oh, I saw another piece of that somewhere. Like a weird looking yellow.
So that's
Yeah, on the top.
basically all I can tell you about that.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
No, it's good.
I don't know how you want to proceed. Do you want to, I'll open up the floor for questions with regard to the muscular system chapter, and then we can talk about respiratory if you'd like.
So Google's for.
Questions on muscular system?
I was going over the neuromuscular junction today. So everything in that process is how the muscles move. Is that, am I understanding that correctly? It, like, the motor neuron connects to the nerve, or nerve fiber comes into contact with the muscle fiber, and that's how, so the nerve tells you to move. Like,
Oh, wow. That was a little car.
That's right. It's all muscles, I would say, smooth, cardiac, or skeletal, are maybe a little. Who, can I ask, who's talking in the background? We need, that's kind of tough to hear.
Speaker on?
Sarah? I'm hearing some talk in the background is all.
Yeah, I don't know who that is. It's not me.
Anybody else got your people talking in the background? You might want to mute your thing if you're talking. Let me pull up the PowerPoint here. Let's see here. Okay, you guys see this muscular, neuromuscular junction slide?
yeah.
Yeah. So anytime skeletal muscle contracts, it does so after being stimulated by nerve tissue. And the same would occur with regard to smooth muscle. Cardiac is a little bit unique in that it can actually can contract somewhat by itself. And we'll get into that later when we get into cardiovascular system, but let's just focus on skeletal for now. So as Julia said, you know, anytime impulse comes down this neuromuscular junction, or to this neuromuscular junction from the motor neuron, which is a part of a nerve, the result is contraction. If there's sufficient stimulus and there's sufficient release of the acetylcholine across the cleft. Does that get to your question?
Yeah.
How about other questions on muscular system? My thinking is, you know, I'm doing these voiceovers so you can go in, look at those, and then we can use our time together to kind of clarify, reinforce, go back and talk more about whatever it is you're having some questions on. As opposed to using Zoom as a formal lecture. At least
could you go over that thing again about how like myofibril filaments pull actin?
Sure.
And that like molecular process?
Yes. Sure. So this is the sliding filament model it's referred to as. So you have to understand what initiates this whole process, and that is at the neuromuscular junction, the acetylcholine is released from the cleft. Let's just go back here for a second. Paint the big picture here. You tell me what happens. The impulse gets to the end of the axon. What's going to happen next?
The synaptic vesicles are going to move closer to the synaptic cleft and release acetylcholine.
Across the cleft. Right, very good, Sarah. And don't forget, the video that is also embedded in here somewhere talks about when that impulse comes down this motor neuron, calcium ions move in, and that is really what pushes the synaptic vesicles to the gap, toward the gap.
Okay.
The book doesn't say that. The video that you should be watching does mention that. Okay, so the acetylcholine diffuses across the cleft. Good, then what? Anybody else want to pick up? Come on, we got how many people here? 13. Some of you must know what's going to happen next. If you don't, you should be studying this.
And they get embedded into the highly folded.
Sarcolemma.
Yeah.
And when you say embedded, explain what that means.
Like into the.
What's the magic word? Oops. The receptors.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are receptors, acetylcholine receptors here in the folded sarcolemma. Once those acetylcholine molecules fit into the receptors, then what happens? That results in sodium ions moving into the muscle cell. Again, and the video talks about that. The influx of sodium into the muscle fiber, into the cell, through the sarcolemma, the cell membrane, converts the nerve impulse into a muscle impulse. And that muscle impulse travels along the surface of the fiber. Where's our diagram here? What happens next? Here comes the muscle impulse traveling along the surface of the cell membrane. Where's it going to go? Anybody? Can I assume you haven't studied this? Anybody out there? Can you hear me? I see a lot of people muted, so I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, I'll explain it. But listen, you guys have got to look at these voiceovers, and you've got to come to these meetings ready to ask questions from now on. Okay. I'm assuming, because I spent hours and hours and hours Sunday putting those together, hours. Can't even tell you how many hours it was. When those impulses come down the sarcolemma, they go into the T tubules. Okay, see the openings on the surface of the membrane, those holes, they lead into the T tubules. And those T tubules extend all the way throughout the entire fiber, in between all of the myofibrils. Okay, it's not just here, these white structures, they go in here, 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 they're all over the place. On either side of the T tubule is this dilated yellow structure, which is part of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is shown here in yellow, okay? And it likewise is all over the place, all over in here. All these little cutaway views that you see here, not the big yellow guys, those are mitochondria. The little specks, everybody see those? Those are these things that have been cut by the knife. So the SR, or sarcoplasmic reticulum, or reticula if we're talking about all of them, it's extremely well networked within the fiber between the myofibrils. And there's a reason for that, because when that impulse goes into the T tubules, do you know what the sarcoplasmic reticulum does in response to that? Joseph, you should know, you were asking the question.
At that point, does it release the calcium into the myofibrils, or?
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
Absolutely right. The result is the release of the calcium from the SR into the myofibrils. Exactly true, Sarah. Absolutely correct. Is Joseph even here yet? Where did he go? He was
in the
here.
chat. He said he had an online exam to go to.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that brings us down to his question. I would have answered it had I known he was going to be going. We are now here at the level of the actin and the myosin. Okay, does everybody know what this diagram indicates? You should understand what this is. If you don't, you need to go back into the PowerPoint and you need to review these slides. Okay, so this has all been discussed earlier. So when that calcium is released, it's going to bond to the troponin molecule, which are these three subunit structures you see here where my little arrow is. Okay, if we go back up, even before the calcium was released, let's just go back earlier, before there was an impulse. What do you notice about the troponin tropomyosin? Well, if you looked at the PowerPoint voiceovers, you know that I said that if you look at this morphology of the actin and the myosin here, on the actin is the troponin and the tropomyosin, which are these purple rods. In this situation or position, the troponin is blocking the binding sites on the actin that the myosin would like to connect to. So there can be no interaction between the two. There can be no contraction. But when we introduce calcium, like we've done here, in response to that muscle impulse, and the calcium binds to the troponin, it causes the tropomyosin to move, which is this long, slender purple guy. Well, suddenly what's available?
The binding sites.
Exactly. The binding sites are now open, those pink structures. All right. And now, with calcium bonded to the troponin, causing its close cousin tropomyosin to move off to the side, the myosin binding sites on the actin are exposed. And then we can see in this next diagram how some of these cross bridges of the myosin are going to come up and grab onto the actin. That's what these four guys have done. Notice on the arm here, if you will, on the globular projection of the myosin, it says ADP plus P. What can you assume has just occurred?
Muscle contraction.
No. Talking about ADP plus P. When does this happen?
Oh, when ATP is broken down.
Exactly. We've broken down an ATP molecule, and that's the result, right?
Yes.
Adenosine diphosphate in the phosphate group. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Remember that? So we have just recently broken down an ATP, and the end products of that breakdown of that molecule are connected to these particular globular proteins, or projections, I should say, of the myosin. So the cross bridge comes up, grabs onto the actin, as we can see here, and then look what happens to the ADP and phosphate that was part of the little projection. It goes bye-bye. When it leaves, look what the projection does. Projections do in this case. They do a power stroke. They move the actin, in this case, from right to left, as the arrow shows. Okay. So if we go back to an earlier diagram that we talked about way back when, let's go to this diagram here. Where am I going to go here? Here's myosin, here's actin, right? You recognize this, the sarcomere? So these four actin molecules shown here as the light blue lines, they're going to get pulled from right to left, like the previous diagram showed. What about these four guys? They're connecting, but they're getting pulled from left to right. Okay? So you have to understand the makeup of the sarcomere. So this diagram that we just talked about a second ago, this is just showing a little part of the sarcomere. And because we're moving from right to left, I know I'm on the right half of the sarcomere. Because on the left half, we're pulling from left to right, and the Z lines are doing what?
They're coming close together.
Exactly. So back to our power stroke. So here goes the power stroke. We slide the actin, in this case, from right to left. New ATP comes on board. Where'd that come from? What makes ATP in your cells?
Mitochondria?
Right.
Yeah.
You see any mitochondria back here? Anybody see any mitochondria? You don't. Do you have color screen?
Oh, yeah, never mind.
Of course you do. If you don't see these yellow things, Sarah, you need glasses. Look at them all. They are all over creation. There's a reason for that. Because contraction and relaxation actually require energy. Yeah, so you've got the built-in organelle right next door to supply the ATP that you're going to need to bring on board the globular projection. Look what that does. That allows it to disconnect from the actin, as we can see here, right? ATP gets broken down now into ADP and phosphate. We recock the cross bridge, and if there's more binding sites to be connected to, let's connect to them. And then let's get rid of this ADP and phosphate and let's do a power stroke. And let's bring more ATP on board and let's disconnect. And then let's break the ATP down and let's recombine it. You see what I'm saying? And we keep doing that again and again and again. What's going to start to happen? We're going to start to see the Z lines getting closer. So this is where we were a second ago. We're right up here, right? So these 4 actin are getting pulled this way. These 4 are getting pulled that way. You can see the top to bottom diagrams. That's basically what occurs from a resting state to a contracting state within a sarcomere. But now you got to think, well, the sarcomeres are in the myofibrils. The myofibrils are in the muscle fibers, right? So when this happens at that microscopic level, all of the sarcomeres are adjacent to one another. What's going to happen to the overall length of the myofibril?
They're going to shorten.
Exactly. What's going to happen to the overall length of the muscle fiber? It's going to shorten, right? So that's what occurs when you contract muscle, skeletal muscle. It's pretty interesting if you just stop and study it, yeah. And I provided you with a link, the Khan Academy. You know, you guys are familiar with it, some of you. Excellent, excellent. This is like I don't know how long it is. I guess I didn't write down the time, but it's, you know, less than 10, 15 minutes. If you want to watch it, he goes through that. And then there's also a video back in Blackboard I told you guys to look at that takes you from, let me see if I can find it real quick. If you go back to the content, which is where I am, and you go down to, where's that video at? Where the heck is it? I thought I had a separate post here. Where the heck is it? Where the heck is it? There was a really good video here on muscle contraction. I don't know where the heck it is. It was just there a day ago. I looked at it. Is anybody familiar with what I'm trying to describe? Where the heck did it go? Oh, I think it's in the PowerPoints now that I think of it. There it is, right here. This one. Watch that.
That's the video I was referring to earlier.
Oh, okay. It's really good. You should watch it probably 3 times. It takes you all the way from the structure of the muscle cell down through contraction. Yeah, that's the one. I forgot I had it in the PowerPoint folder. That's basically the process of contraction. So I'll, again, open it up for questions. Other things you want to review, talk about, go over. I guess I have to assume that you haven't looked at this yet, a lot of you. Or you're okay with it. I don't know. Give me some feedback here because I'm not sure what's going on out there.
Can you explain the lactic acid threshold? Because I see it in the book and I'm just not really understanding it all the way, I guess.
Sure. So, and you can all see the PowerPoint slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what this talks about is once you have utilized as much aerobic respiration as you can, your muscles have tried to do that, to maximize the amount of ATP produced. Once you've utilized all that oxygen, because you're really running hard, you're running a race, let's say, and sure, you're trying to supply muscle with adequate oxygen so that your mitochondria can produce, 34 to 36 ATPs per glucose. Think back to chapter 4, we talked about all this.
Mm-hmm.
There comes a point in time when the muscle may turn anaerobic. In other words, it runs out of oxygen. Your respiratory and cardiovascular systems cannot keep up with the needs of the muscles. And so that's what triggers the big X here. We can't do Krebs cycle, we can't do electron transport. All we can do is glycolysis. And in that case, you remember again from chapter 4, glycolysis was that series of 9 reactions, starting with glucose, ending with 2-pyruvic acid being made, right? And in this particular instance, those 2-pyruvic acids get converted into what's called lactic acid. And that's what can build up in the muscle, cause cramps, and so forth. So what your body tries to do, and there's basically the process we just mentioned a moment ago. This occurs in the absence of oxygen. Your body can only produce how many ATPs if it's going this route? Only. You can only do glycolysis. How many ATPs are you making per glucose?
2, right?
2, just 2, yeah. 2 per glucose. That's not very many when you're used to making 36, right? Okay, so that's the reality. Only making 2. It's better than nothing, but the problem is that as this lactic acid continues to build up in the muscles, your body's got to convert that back to glucose. And that's what your liver does. That's what this slide is talking about. That you're converting this lactic acid back to good old C6H12O6. But notice that that process also requires energy. That's not free. It costs your cells some energy currency to do that. Now, you might say, I want to use that to run the race. Well, that's fine. You can do all you want to do it. But the reality is you're expending energy once you start to accumulate this to convert it back. You've got to. You can't let this accumulate.
Does it build up the...
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, is the buildup of the lactic acid what would cause cramps eventually if you keep on going without the oxygen?
Yeah, absolutely. Cramping can be a result of lactic acid buildup. And it might not happen the moment you get the lactic acid buildup. It could happen hours later, even as you're converting it back into glucose. But that is often a symptom, if you will, or a end result is muscle cramping. So what ends up happening then is as you're exercising and your muscles have gone from the aerobic to the anaerobic state, you build up what is referred to as an oxygen debt. Okay? So here's the exercise, here's running the race. You're taking in lots of oxygen, but you're building up a deficit of oxygen as time goes on because you're approaching that anaerobic state. And that's when you start getting into this oxygen debt issue that you have to repay and bring that oxygen level, consumption level back to the pre-exercise state, if you will. And so what do we define that oxygen debt really as? Well, this is the sentence. It's a little lengthy, but it describes exactly what has to be repaid back before you can kind of achieve a pre-exercise physiologic state. So you've got to deliver enough oxygen to the liver to convert that lactic acid back into glucose. Okay, it's this reaction we talked about. You got to have enough oxygen so that you can, convert that back. And then you've got to reestablish the oxygen state in the muscle cells so that you can resynthesize, make more ATP and this creatine phosphate material that is described in one of the earlier slides. You've got to return the body back to where it was before you started the race. That's the way to think of it as. And this can take a long time. It can take hours and hours to pay that back. But if you've ever run a race or exerted yourself such that you get to the end of whatever you're doing and you feel like you just can't physically go on, you mentally might want to finish the race, but the body says, ain't going to happen. You've hit a brick wall, so to speak, right? There's some oxygen debt that needs to be paid back in these three guys. Yeah.
So that's why you're breathing harder and faster by the end.
Well, you're doing that even before you get there. Yeah. But certainly at this point you are. In other words, you're trying to employ your respiratory and cardiovascular systems to get the blood to the tissues where it's needed, but you're working so hard, the other systems can't keep up, can't get the oxygen levels back. It takes a while to get that back. Okay. To the pre-exercise state. That's what this oxygen debt basically is. So we can train, right? Athletes train all the time. They do that for a reason. And there's some reasons or benefits of training that can lower the oxygen debt. You can perform much more efficiently if you train than if you don't ever train. So if you have more enzymes that can break down glucose more efficiently, if you can increase the blood supply to the muscle fiber, if you can make more mitochondria, you'll have more ATP, produced. These are all really important cellular changes that we see happen as a result of training. So there's a lot of positives. Now, if you do all these things, does that mean you'll never reach oxygen debt? No, everybody can reach it. That's not like you'll never get it. You'll never reach it, but you have a less of a chance of hitting that brick wall, if you will, having trained than if you didn't train, basically. That's a long explanation for your question, Sarah, I guess, but.
Well, that helped.
Anything else, regarding that you want to go over?
No, you covered all my questions on that one.
How about other folks, other questions?
I am good.
Again, you got to go to those voiceovers. You got to watch those. You got to get into the book. And if something's not making sense, this is the place to talk about it. Yeah, there's some muscle physiology here that I talk about in one of the voiceovers, and we talk about smooth muscle, how it differs from skeletal, and then we wrap up the chapter talking about cardiac. That's basically what the chapter has in it. How about respiratory system? Questions on any respiratory stuff? Has anybody gotten into that system yet? I did 2 voiceovers on respiratory system. What I'm trying to do, as best I can, is to keep us sort of on schedule. So this is what I'm going to try to adhere to. Let me get this off.
Pretty cool fish.
Yeah. As a halibut I caught in Alaska.
I hear those things can grow huge.
They can. So, how do I get out of this?
Did you eat it?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
delicious. So this is the schedule that I'm trying to adhere to, which means this week we should have wrapped up muscular and started respiratory. And next week we're going to be finishing up respiratory. So this is what should be guiding your studying. You got to keep up with this. Otherwise we're going to have problems because we got to get through these chapters. I haven't been reading the chat here. So Liz sent something here. I didn't really download this. What is this, Liz?
I just downloaded them. One's it's like a worksheet, like filled out with like the diagram kind of, and then the other one's like the respiratory or the process, or not the respiratory. I'm sorry. Pull that one out.
Okay. Oh, great. If you find that helpful, excellent.
The steps of muscle contraction.
Okay, great. Great.
It's in like the group chat. So if you click on the chat at the bottom, it'll pop up on the right-hand side. And you can download them. She posted them to download.
I see the download button here.
I don't see a download button. But...
I mean, I downloaded them. If you want, I can just post them in the group as long as it's okay with Liz. I'll post them in the Facebook group.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
You already posted them there.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. And don't forget, in our course Blackboard content folder, there are, I'm sure, some other additional ID sorts of exercises. It may apply more to lab than lecture, but I suspect there's some lecture stuff there too. You could look at.
In the voiceovers, like I can't see where your mouse is at all.
I'm struggling with the same issue. Like with the diagrams, you can't see what you're talking about.
In the voiceovers, you can't see the pen that I'm moving a pen around and making colors on the diagram.
We can see that, but if you're like, I seen like where you like circled things, but I can't see like your mouse if you're like talking about something and like pointing to it.
Okay, only when I activate the pen.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't see it until you activate it.
When I do the screen sharing though.
Yeah, like with this is awesome because you can actually see like what you're pointing to.
Okay, all right. Okay, so basically you're telling me if go ahead, Amanda, what were you saying?
I like with this, when you were like explaining the parts, I just like couldn't see where you were pointing. So and you're like a purple color and it's all kind of purple. So I mean, I didn't know if you could like fix that at all so I could see where your mouse is going when you're doing the voiceover or not.
Well, I thought I did a lot of drawing on some of those slides, but certainly I will do more of that if that's what you'd like me to do.
It's just like helpful when you're explaining, like if I just looking at it and following where you're pointing. And
okay.
Like you.
So,
yeah.
So you're saying use the markers, the pen. I have two options: a pen and a marker. I think. Use that more often as I'm describing the processes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you could like point thing, like circle things, like as you're talking about them?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for that feedback. Yeah, I thought I was, but I'm not doing enough of it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for some of them you were. I know, like I struggled like at the first couple slides of the muscles, just because we like kind of started them in class, and then there was such a gap between everything, so like it wasn't fresh. So then when you were talking about it, I'm like, well, I don't remember what all this stuff is.
Okay. Okay. Good. That's great feedback. Yeah, let me know about that. Absolutely.
It's like you always have your pointer or your laser, and I'm like used to following along like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, we're not in class anymore, but
yeah.
Watch wherever you went. And
yep. Okay. Very good. I will make more of an effort to use those markers. I was kind of worried. I was just making a mess on the slide, and it was hard to see stuff after a while. But no, okay, all right. No, I understand what you're saying. So I will make every effort to try to emphasize those processes, especially that involve maybe like contraction of the muscle fiber or the myofibril or whatever, sarcomere. Yep.
Yeah, going over it here was super helpful.
Well, good. You know, I debated about how I should do this online teaching because, again, as you know, this is the first time I've ever done it, and I thought we could do a formal lecture, but I just don't think it's going to work very well. I would like to continue to do those voiceovers, especially for those parts of the chapter that I think really require that sort of tutorial, if you will. There may be some sections of some of these chapters that are, say, more anatomic, like I said in the respiratory chapter, the first part of that. I didn't go over the anatomy of a lot of that, a little bit, but I would rather spend time doing voiceovers and also talking to you guys on topics that you feel you're struggling with. And typically that's the physiology. Not always, but I mean, for example, you can't understand muscle contraction unless you understand the anatomy. So they both go hand in hand. But it just seems like if we can all agree to try to be up to whatever section of whatever chapter we're scheduled to be at, then we can kind of talk about that when we get together like this. It's a little different from what we did in person. You know, you got to look at the voiceovers before we meet. At least that's going to help you the best, I think. If you haven't looked at any of the voiceovers, this may have been a bit of a waste of time. Oh, you learned some stuff. Yeah, we did some stuff, but I want it to be as helpful and as efficient as we can when we do get together. One thing I wanted to ask you before I forgot was, would you guys like to meet like every Monday and Wednesday at say 1:15 like we typically would meet if we were in class? And just kind of build that into our weekly schedule? The micro students were telling me yesterday that they really like the idea of meeting during the time we would have met in class, which is Tuesday, Thursday, 1:15 to 2:30. So that's when we're meeting. I'm not opposed to another time or day, but there's something to be said for being kind of consistent in what we do.
Yeah, I definitely like the idea of being on here at the same time we were in class.
Yeah. Just because most people's schedules are like set up so that they've worked out for them anyway.
Yeah.
I know that some people are changing and stuff, but I think that's helpful to have like a set schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah, the time's not that big of a deal to me. Whatever would help the most other people, as long as it's not 6 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
Believe me, Kevin, it will not be 6 a.m. Let me just read the chat here. I have not been keeping up on this. Yeah, the voiceovers are nice. You can go back and read them over again. The Zoom meetings that we are having now, for those that can't come, maybe are working or had to go for whatever reason today somewhere, they can go back and play that over. The voiceovers are easier because you can control where to stop and start. If you do the Zoom, you're not exactly sure what was said when. You got to watch the whole darn thing. So you're liking the voiceovers. Oh, that's good.
I just like the fact that if I play the voiceovers and I'm looking in my book, it kind of feels like I'm back in class.
Yeah, that's right. That's good.
And I'm trying to take notes with them, so it's nice to be able to like pause, because we can't like pause you in real life, obviously.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Uh-huh. Okay, well, I'm glad that you guys are using them. The bad thing about those darn things that I don't like is I will often I'll click on something and it'll advance to the next slide before I wanted to. That's happened several times. And it just irks me. It's like I can't do anything about it other than say sorry, or else I gotta retape. And I did that like a couple times. And it just takes so much time. If I have to stop, I can't like edit back a slide and start from there. I gotta start from the beginning. And the other day I had my thumb drive plugged into the USB port. And I had the camera unplugged and I did a voiceover. Well, guess what? It didn't save to Zoom. I spent a half hour on a lesson that I had to redo. Silly, dumb things like that person does, but you learn. Okay, so let's plan from this point on, and I'll send an email out for those that couldn't come today, to meet Mondays and Wednesdays, 1:15. Start at 1:15, and you know, I don't have a problem going past our normal time. So here it is, almost 3 o'clock already. I mean, we can't go on for hours and hours and hours, and you guys have a life, but I'm certainly willing to stay as long as you guys have questions. Now, of course, the break starts next Wednesday and goes from, I think, the 1st through the 10th. No, 12th.
Or 13th.
Come back to 13th.
Come back to 13th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, believe you me, I am going to be working over the break doing more voiceovers. So if you are so inclined that you want to take a look at what I've got posted before we come back on the 13th, and I'm not saying you have to do that at all. I want you to have a break and enjoy the holidays as best one can, given the situation. But if you want, I'm going to try to get a jump on probably the blood chapter, or well, I'll see how my week goes or what have you, but we won't meet during that time. You guys, you know, that's a break that's been scheduled and you deserve a break, so we won't have class. But we will meet Monday coming up. And again, in my mind, if you can't come to these Zoom meetings, I'm not taking attendance, all right? We're not doing that. I'm taping it, so it's there for those that can't come. You know, if you can come, obviously that's preferable, but I'm not going to take attendance or anything like that. We also have the lab practical that I wanted to mention, because I'm sure you're wondering when that's going to be given, and I'll have to include that in the email to everybody just to clarify for those that aren't here today. We'll do that lab practical on Tuesday the 31st, and my thinking is to open it up at 10 o'clock and have it open until 2. Have a 4-hour block. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
And then I'll probably give you like I'm thinking a 90-minute time limit. That should be plenty of time. There's 60 points. Most of the questions are going to be, you know, 1 or 2 points apiece.
work at the hospital until 3 o'clock on Tuesday.
You work until 3 o'clock. Who said
Yeah,
that?
Liz.
Okay.
Misty is saying she works until 3:30 on Tuesday.
Oh yeah, okay. All right, well then let's do this. Let's, how about if we open it at, what if we open it up at, now this is gonna probably cause problems for other people now, but what if we did 1 until, or we do like 2 to 6? Would that work? Misty and who else?
That would work for me.
My day's pretty much wide open, so.
I don't do anything.
Same here.
I haven't changed my work hours. I still only work on Fridays.
Liz says she works 7 to 3. Is that 7 p.m. to 3 a.m.?
No, it's 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So that time, the 2 to 6s works for me.
Okay, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you typed that after I said that.
No.
Okay, okay. So 2 to 6 works for everybody. All right, that's what I will, at this point, go with.
Now, how would we access the quiz or lab practical?
What you will do is go to your, well, let's see. Sarah, I think you had suggested the other day that you prefer to have it in the lab course shell. I had initially said let's put it in the lecture course shell because we're synchronizing both labs. But you felt that was not, it was kind of confusing. So whatever you guys want to do, I don't care. I can put them in the separate lab course shells. Now keep in mind we haven't been using those. So you just got to make sure that somebody's not going to type back and say, I don't see it in the lecture course shell. Where is it? We moved it. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm envisioning is going to happen.
Yeah, I see your point.
Uh,
I mean, I'm okay with whatever. I was just saying that as opposed to like the lab work, go in the lab file or whatever.
right. But what lab stuff other than the practicals would we be putting in there?
The quizzes.
Well, yeah, the Monday group took
Yeah.
2 quizzes and then we're done with the quizzes, I think.
Okay.
So it was just the Monday group that we were doing that with.
Not taking any more quizzes in the lab?
Yeah. Won't we have more lab quizzes?
There's 3 more on the schedule. Well, then maybe that's all.
Hang on. Yeah, we do have a couple more lab quizzes listed here. Yeah, I mean, I guess since we're putting the lab quizzes in the lab course shell, we might as well put the practicals in there too. That kind of makes sense. I had forgotten we had 3 more after the second practical. I'm getting my classes all mixed up. I told some people some things and some people other things. So we're not doing the lecture quizzes anymore, but we're going to stick with the lab quizzes. Okay. I thought I had told you guys. I'll go back and look at my syllabus here. I thought I had told you guys we weren't going to do any more lab quizzes.
I think you said lecture quizzes only when we switched in the beginning. That we are canceling all the rest of the lecture quizzes. And the updated course shell says that we still have lab quizzes.
He did put a note at the end of like the grading and accumulated points that we had 4 lecture quizzes that we were going to take, and then we were going to take a total of 5 lab quizzes. I don't remember how many we took before.
Right. Okay. Let me
here, but
yeah, let me go to this.
Sorry, I don't mean to confuse you.
No, I'm not confused. I think I've confused you guys maybe. So here's you all see the blackboard?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we go to content. Here's the updated lecture and lab schedule. Now, at the bottom here, it indicates note 4 lecture quizzes will be taken and the lowest drop. So we all talked about how we're taking no more lecture quizzes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Note 5 lab quizzes will be taken and the lowest drop. So if you go back to the original syllabus, I don't know why this does this. Go back to the syllabus here. This is the original syllabus. It lists 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 quizzes. Okay, the red asterisks.
Mm-hmm.
My thinking was that once we got caught up, which would be right here, we would have already taken 5 quizzes. And we would eliminate the remaining 3. And hence, where the heck is it? My note here at the bottom about the the 5 lab quizzes. So what I got to do, and the points reflect that here. Okay, what I've got to do is I've got to remove these asterisks because you're thinking it still says here 3 more lab quizzes. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So we'll just be done with lab quizzes. I mean, fine by me.
Yeah, we still have the 2 practicals. We still have the 2 practicals. Now, if you guys want the quizzes, I mean, I guess we could do them. You can still do them if you find that that's helpful. I mean, but my initial thinking was that we would discontinue the lab quizzes and just do the 2 practicals.
I mean, it's one less thing for you to do. It doesn't really make that much of a
that as
difference.
it is, you know, making you guys kind of focus on what needs to get focused on.
I don't know. I feel like these kind of make us like have to know what's going on.
Forces you to keep up.
Yeah, kind of. Because otherwise you sit here and are like, well, I have no idea what we're talking about anyway.
Okay. All right, well then let's leave them here. I'm going to have to adjust this, and we'll put the practical 2 and 3 and the quizzes in the individual course shells. So the Monday group already has 2 quizzes in there. The Wednesday group has nothing in there, but you will have your practicals in your lab section shells. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll need to go back and review this points, and that'll affect this overall number scale too. Okay.
I wish this whole coronavirus thing never happened. Everything is thrown way off.
Yeah, it sure does. Sure does.
So as far as the extra credit paper, I know you said that you wanted us to talk to you about topics before spring break, so just like email you or something.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Some people have started to do that. Some people talked to me before we had this whole thing happen too.
On top of their game.
But it's probably good to use the break to get it done, because if you wait until after we come back, I can promise you, you won't have time to do it. It just, under the best of circumstances, the last 3 weeks, or in our case, maybe it's 4 weeks. I haven't looked to see 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's basically 4 weeks then finals. It just gets super crazy, and it's going to be that times 50 given our lives. It just is. So if you don't get it done by the time you get back, it's going to be hellish to get it done. So maybe use some of that time as best you can to get that the lion's share of it done. Maybe that might be a good goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I discussed with you my topic, correct?
What did you do? What did you suggest to do?
I think I suggested that I do the sickle cell disease.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
The only stipulation that I make with regard to the extra credit paper is that the topic directly pertain to one of the organ systems we talk about in A&P 1, or some topic we talk about in A&P 1. That's really the only stipulation. So you can't do diabetes, you can't do macular degeneration, you can't do
ovary syndrome.
Pardon me?
I said you can't do polycystic ovary syndrome.
Uh-huh.
How we're gonna submit them? About that?
I'm not hearing you, Amanda.
Do you know how we're gonna submit them to you?
I have to talk to our IT folks to see whether maybe you can, there's a way of well, you could email them to me. That's, I don't know how hard that's going to be. Using Gmail, I think there are ways you can drop the information in like a Google Drive, but I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with Google Drive.
For other classes, they just have like a Dropbox on Blackboard.
Say that one more time.
Like for other classes, I've submitted papers just through Blackboard. They have like a submission thing, and you attach the file, and
Okay.
then it sent it to them.
Yeah, it's called Dropbox through Blackboard.
And I've submitted one where you had to also agree to you had to sign something about any plagiarism, because they would use some kind of database to make sure that.
And it posted it online and read it and made sure that you didn't have any notes or whatever that weren't cited right.
So somehow the system evaluates the paper, or what? I don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to sign and say that you didn't plagiarize anything, and that they will look through it. It was my communications teacher last semester. I remember I had to do a 10-page paper, and you had to sign before you submitted it that you didn't plagiarize anything, and that it would be checked by whatever the school's database. So.
Yeah, that's what I had to do for English Comp 1 and 2 with Morris.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it depends, because like Sarah said with Professor Morris, he has you check a little box, but on my lifespan development classes, I don't have to check any box before submitting a paper.
Mhm.
So it might be an option you can select to turn it on, but
Okay. I'll investigate that. Yeah, if that's an easy way to submit the sources as well as the paper itself, then absolutely, let's make it as easy as we can.
So it's just like the citations that you want, or you need the actual like articles that we got information from?
What I have in the past asked for are highlighted copies of the text. This may be a little more difficult to ask you to do given the situation. If I can, and I need to investigate Dropbox and see exactly what the anti-plagiarism clause is or how that works. If I can, I don't know, if I can have this internet search your paper, how this works, I have no idea, to check to make sure you're not plagiarizing, then that defeats the need to have the highlighted material. Because we all know, let's not be dumb. We all know we can go and buy a paper online or download a paper free or whatever and submit it and done. That's the way it goes. I mean, we're not naive enough to think it doesn't. It does. Mm-hmm. So there are these anti-plagiarism things in place to catch that. Not that you guys would ever do that.
No, I mean, never.
Yeah. So I'll investigate Dropbox. In the meantime, I probably won't ask you other than the actual sources.
Okay.
We'll see. Let me investigate that. Let me think about that.
All right. With the extra credit paper, you were saying that you would be working over spring break, right? So like if I emailed you a copy, would you proofread it for me?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I cannot proofread 30 copies. Okay. You need to make sure that you proofread, or I don't know, send it to the Learning Center to proofread, to help you, whatever, to catch those grammatical issues. I just don't have time to proofread all those extra credit papers. When you turn that in, it's got to be the polished, ready to roll.
Maybe we could do something on Facebook where like we all submit like to each other, or email us each other a copy, and we can proofread each other's. I don't know.
That's really good, Juliana. That's a wonderful idea.
He's like, I've been on your Facebook group. There's nothing going on there.
that is just amazing idea. If you implement that, I will give you extra 30 points.
Listen, I'm down. I will take you up on that offer.
No, I mean, if you guys can do that, I mean, that's beyond kudos. That's just amazing. If you're willing to work together to that extent, that would be shocking to me. But if you can do it, it's to your benefit, absolutely. Because some people are better writers than others, and others are better proofreaders than others, and all that. I certainly get that. But don't forget the Learning Center is still technically open virtually, and I can't help but think that you couldn't turn to them and ask that question, Sarah.
Yeah.
So, but you bring up a very, very good point, and that is, and I warned you guys when I got the lab reports back that some of them were atrocious. I mean, beyond atrocious in terms of, this is not college level writing. This is even high school level. It's really bad for some of you guys. And so you can remedy that to a large extent by taking the time and effort to having somebody look it over before you turn it in. And you just, if you can't, it's hard for the person writing it to proofread, because they're not going to catch their errors because they just wrote it. You know what I'm saying? So you got to get somebody else who is a little better proofreader than you might be to help you do that. So I guess I would reach out to the Learning Center and just ask that question. Do you provide a service whereby if I sent you, you know, an extra credit research paper, is there a policy whereby you would look that over and give me feedback? I don't know the answer to that, but that's a fair question to ask the Learning Center. If you guys can work internally, that's great. But again, you got to make sure you know a run-on sentence when you see one. You know what I'm saying? So, no, it's great. So I'm looking here at the chat. Misty says, can you put it in both places? That's a good question. I don't, if I put the lab in the lecture course shell, how will it grade it? I think I'll just try to keep them in the lab and lab, lecture and lecture.
That might change your grading though, because all of our grades are in the lecture course shell. Like when we go to look at our grades, we have to click on lecture for all of them.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if it'll transfer it over. I just probably, I don't know. I gotta ask Stan about that. I don't know. Yeah, it creates potential issues. It's not a big deal. I can put it in my little black book here too and just crunch the numbers, let you know what your scores are. We'll figure that out. So Kaya's asking, what chapter does the practical cover? Well,
11 through 18.
Right.
On the lab practices.
I sent an email out about that the other day. We said we weren't going to include the knee replacement video because the Monday group has not watched it. You're all getting emails, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to make sure you're reading your emails. Okay. Okay, so we will continue with the lab quizzes. I will send an email out on that. I will also send an email out about the time. Kai asks, are we teaching ourselves the lab stuff or will we have meetings for lab? My thinking is to certainly at least have a Zoom meeting to kind of talk about what is in each lab and how you should go about learning those labs. But since we have the practical kind of in front of us, I was going to wait and talk more about that after we came back. If you want to work ahead on the skeletal muscle structure, muscles of the head, face, and neck, and all that, again, refer to the syllabus. You can begin to work through that. I will be giving you, in fact, in Blackboard, there is a list of the muscles by exercise that you're going to want to be able to recognize and identify on the diagram since we don't have models. So you can go into Blackboard, print off that list of muscles that you need to know for exercises 20 through 23 and start working on those over the break if you want. Otherwise, we'll talk about that once we come back after break. The APA or MLA format, either one is fine. So it looks, Misty is saying that the 2 lab quizzes are separated. So if you want to see your total course points, you're going to have to add the lab points to the lecture points. So some simple addition you got to do. So, yeah. Now, after we get through the practical and it's been graded, if you want to know what your total points are, you can do the math yourself, or you can ask me and you can double check the numbers with me. I'm happy to give you that too. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Things you'd like to talk about, go over? If not, we will meet then on Monday at 1:15. And that is the 31st, 30th. Any questions, comments, complaints? I'll even take complaints. It's okay.
Did you see that China finally had their peak?
Well, I had heard on the news that the Great Wall is open. Tourists are, I mean, not a lot of foreign tourists, but the Chinese are climbing the Great Wall of China. So things are coming back to normal a little bit from what I'm hearing over there. Yeah.
How many months has it been over there?
Well, I think February, March. Yeah, it's been a couple months. So, you know, we're behind them, as you all know.
Yeah, I think we're like 3 months behind them.
It's interesting to see how this is all going to play out. I think, and I've got to be careful what I say publicly, I guess. So I'm gonna take off my teaching cap and just be a regular person here. I get troubled when I hear the president talk about wanting to open up the economy by Easter. I think you're asking for a Pandora's box to be opened if you do that. I mean, I get the pressure he's under for lots of reasons, not the least of which is there's this election thing coming up. But I'm sure he's getting a lot of blowback from Anthony Fauci and his Surgeon General and just about everybody in the world to not do that before we should be doing that, because you're going to be having tens of thousands of people dying just because you want to get the Dow and the S&P 500 boosted. I mean, you know, I have a 401k too, and I took a huge hit. But, you know, you have faith in the system, you steady as she goes, and, you know, health of the American public is more important than anything else, I think.
I think another reason for him saying about Easter is because, I mean, let's get real here. Who is really, during spring break, who's really going to say, oh, let's not go to the beach? I mean, they have already shut down a party that was going to happen on spring break anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that was only because it was publicly announced. So, I mean, you're going to have hundreds of people on the beaches anyway.
So are you an advocate of opening it up as soon as we can?
Well, I'm an advocate of doing whatever's best for America. Like,
but what does that mean, though? Best for the American 80-year-old or the best for the, you know?
No, the 80-year-olds.
Huh?
Like the elderly population. I don't want to see anything happen to them. I'm just saying, like, how many Americans, though, like when it comes to spring break, are really going to say, hey, let's not go to the beach?
Well, there's always going to be some people that will always do the opposite of what might be right or what they're told, or, I mean, it's just the way it is, right? Mm-hmm. There's people that will never, ever do what probably should be done.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
I think
human nature.
Yeah, I think to a certain degree, like the lockdown and everything is going to have to get worse before anything gets better, because
exactly, you have people that aren't following it already.
Yeah, big time.
Look at the parks in New York City.
Yeah. Well, living in a big metropolitan area is so much different than living in a rural part of the state, as we all know.
Mhm.
You know. Yeah, I don't know. It's scary. And, you know, the big concern, as you've all heard a million times, is that if we overwhelm the healthcare system, and they've already got people laying on the ground in the hallways in the hospitals. There's not enough beds, and we're just coming to the part of the curve. We're just starting the curve now, and we're going to be in that upward exponential growth for a couple of weeks. It's going to get really bad in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I think. I don't think we've any idea how bad it's going to get.
Yeah, and with the lack of proper PPE and whatnot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like at work, we are reusing our masks. Like it's terrible.
Yeah.
It's like what blows your mind how we could be so unprepared when we kind of had an idea that it was going to come.
Right.
Yeah.
We pride ourselves on being so advanced, yet, I mean, a crisis hit and we all kind of collapsed.
Well, I think it's fair to say, it's fair for the president to say, you know, and Fauci also, that our system was not designed to withstand this sort of situation, and that's really true. It is not. I don't know that any country was, although South Korea was pretty prepared. If you look at the news. So I think that's true. But I agree with you that this was not taken seriously when our politicians were told that this is coming, and as a result, we are 2, 3, 4 weeks behind the ball, and as a result, a lot of people are going to die as a result of that. It is the reality.
I think a lot of the deaths in the first wave of Washington nursing homes could have been avoided if we had taken this seriously back when it was told to us.
Yeah. Well, most people have never lived through such a situation. You know, the last big pandemic that even comes remotely close to this was the 1918 Spanish flu, which I think I told you guys about that Nova show that was on, didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a chance, you can probably find that. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
How did it end? Like, how did it finally stop?
Well, several 100,000 people died, and it just sort of ran its course, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you think that will happen with this, or it'll like be a vaccine needed?
Well, they're certainly trying to work on a vaccine, right? But the odds of it getting into the general public are, they say, a year or more away. Although that could change depending upon what research is done between now and then. They're trying to fast track all this, the FDA and all that. But it could just be a function of letting the epidemic kind of reach that peak, and then it's going to crash just as quickly as it went up. The idea that they want to do is lower the curve. So the advantage is more people will not get sick as quickly. The disadvantage is it's going to take longer for this whole thing to get done. So, I mean, in a very weird kind of demented way, one could say, let people die, and then we'll get over the hump and we'll be down to normal quicker. I mean, I've never heard anybody say that, and I'm not advocating that, but that's sort of what the data would show.
That's a pretty crappy way to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that anybody's saying that we should do it, but that might be the end result.
Mm-hmm.
I don't call it a silver lining by any means at all. I'm not saying that we should let it happen that way, but you do know that if you lower the curve, we're not going to be going back to school as quickly probably as if we let the thing just kind of go through the system.
Right. But we save a lot of lives in that.
Yeah,
way.
That's right. Absolutely.
My mom's thought process is that it's going to kind of be like 9/11, like, no terrorist things were in place before the attacks.
Yeah.
And now hopefully, like, once we get through this, at least we'll be prepared for the next time.
We certainly should be more prepared than we were, right? I hope we don't super overreact to it, whatever that means, I don't know, but there was an office, you know, in place when President Trump took office, and you probably heard the news, you know, his security advisor, John Bolton, suggested that be eliminated, so he eliminated it. Now, would that have made a difference? You know, hindsight's always 20/20. It sure wouldn't have hurt to have had it. But you can bet that it's going to be taken more seriously now. Absolutely. These pandemics will come again. This is not the last time we're going to see them. They come all the time.
Let's just hope that next time we take it much seriously, much sooner.
Yeah, right, Sarah, that's true. Okay, well, it's always great to chat about this stuff with you guys. I'm glad you're interested, and it's, you know, it's affecting all of our lives, right, potentially, or our loved ones, maybe us too. The governor says 80% of us are going to get it, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. Okay, so we'll next meet on Monday at 1:15. You guys start looking at those voiceovers, get the muscular system done, and start respiratory. I will continue to add a couple more of those to the respiratory you know, folder. And you're also, you know, preparing for that practical on Tuesday. Anything else I'm forgetting?
I can think of.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go. I've got some things I can do.
All right.
And we'll see you on Monday.
All
Have a
right.
good weekend.
Okay, guys, you too.
Bye.
Bye.